Ministry of Environment takes this opportunity to welcome you to this stakeholder consultation to discuss the Climate and Ocean Risk Vulnerability Index, also known as CORVI. It is a project that will look at the Basseterre area in identifying a risk profile. The project is being implemented by the Ministry of Environment and cooperatives representing the government of St. Kitts Nevis, with partners from the International Cooperation and Development Fund, Taiwan ICDF, the Ocean Affairs Council, and the Stimson Center. I take this opportunity this morning to express our sincere gratitude to Sally and her team from the Stimson Center, to Ms. Regine Liu and her staff from the Taiwan ICDF, and our colleagues from the OAC, which is the Ocean Affairs Council, who could not have been here today with us. In response to this climate crisis, the Stimson Center has developed a CORVI tool, which is a decision support tool comparing diverse ranges of economic, social, and environmental risks connected to climate changes to produce a coastal city risk profile. In Basseterre, the CORVI project will seek to integrate information and resilience with work already underway and look across the landscape. Empirical data has already been collected, and we are here now to engage in a series of interviews and surveys to provide support to the information that has already been collected. We feel that this will culminate into an innovative new data set and a new risk profile for Basseterre, which can be used to help us to prioritize investment, aid in the design of resilient planning, and also unlock additional climate finance. I would have mentioned that we have a few project partners, and just to give you a quick overview in terms of the role of the ministry in this particular exercise. The ministry is responsible for conducting and engaging in outreach activities, to engage in interviews and surveys, to ensure that all recordings and transcripts are submitted to the team that will do the initial assessment, to also look at to draft an initial assessment looking at climate resilience planning, and also with consultation from a project steering committee that has been established to identify the geographic scope of the extent, and all of you will have a handout in front of you that gives you a quick snapshot of the area that we have been designed as the Greater Basseterre in response to this particular exercise. We believe that the collective goal of the partnerships that we have collaborated will help us, as long as the local researchers and the government, to ensure that the research is conducted in a manner that is relevant to the city and the national context, while also designing to prioritize actions and minimize climate risks. In this regard, I want to say thanks again for being here. We look forward to seeking your support and suggestions as we move forward to ensure that the final output that is presented today and at the end of the project is one that will allow us to incorporate the relevant information as we, not just within the private sector, but also the public sector. And again, in this vein, I look forward to your continued engagement in today's exercise and the activities to come. I now will hand over to Ms. Sally, who will give a brief overview in terms of what the CORVI tool intends to do, and then we'll move forward. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Well, I guess I can see me. Good morning, everybody. Thank you. Cheryl, thank you so much for the introduction and for just being such an amazing partner. We've been here for about a week, and I have to say that the red carpet has been rolled out to all of us. We have seen so much. We've met so many really amazing people. I swear, I've never met so many people who have so much energy and are doing so many things all at the same time. The entrepreneurship is just incredible. And we've had an opportunity to really tour around the island state and see so many of the issues that are related to your culture, climate change, and just economics overall. So we've really been very, very fortunate. So I'd like to, in addition to thanking Cheryl and the Ministry of Environment and Cooperatives, also thank our colleagues from Taiwan, the ICDF and OAC, and the mission here, Technical Mission, thank you. who have also been incredibly helpful while we've been here. And so to let you know, so again, I'm Sally Yozel. I'm from Washington, D.C. I work for the Stimson Center, which is a research think tank, a research institution that really focuses on security issues. I head up the environmental security program. And what we do is we travel around the world and we do research into security issues, particularly for me, it's the environment, whether it's illegal fishing or climate. And we have here, we're working on a climate project called CORVI, the Climate and Ocean Risk Vulnerability Index. CORVI is obviously much easier to say. And, at the Stimson Center, my program, we don't just do research, write a report, and put it up on the shelf. We really consider ourselves research to action. For people who have known me over the years, if I just did research and didn't do anything, I would I'd be done with myself. If I don't get the action, if we don't turn our work into action, it's meaningless in our opinion, in my opinion. So that's what CORVI is all about. And so what I'd like to do today is a few things. First of all, I have two of my colleagues, Natalie First and Tracy Rouleau, who are with us. And what we're going to do today, if it's okay with everyone, is I'm going to give a brief overview of CORVI, and then I'd like all of you, if you would, to introduce yourselves so we have a sense of who's here. And then I'm going to ask you also a question about climate and risk here in the Basseterre area. And, if you could name one issue or provide one sentence that really highlights for you what you think is the risk when you think of climate change and the need for risk and the need for resilience in Basseterre, that would be really helpful. So if you wouldn't mind, if you could look at this infographic, I think you might see a lot of familiar issues on this slide. And this is an infographic we use all around the world. And so I think, you might see, for example, the climate-induced flooding in the low-lying areas that I know is a concern here, or the flood damage to infrastructure or property that undermines vital industries, or agricultural issues, or the flood events that could potentially exacerbate health risks or affect storage of fresh water. We've seen amazing reefs and mangroves. We've talked to people about sea level rise, water quality. We've heard all about Hurricane George from 1998, sort of the wastewater issues, septic systems, development, pollution, and enforcement. So we've really had an opportunity to hear a lot. The importance, obviously, of tourism, light manufacturing. It's really been an incredible week. But what we hear and what we know when we talk about all these issues is the interconnectedness. And that's what CORVI is all about. It's connecting these issues, not looking at them in a stovepiped manner, but recognizing that in real life, these issues are connected. And that is what we try to do when we create a CORVI. And so with CORVI, if you look at the next sort of slide, that's the big round wheel. If you look at the big round wheel, we call it the CORVI wheel. And what we do with CORVI is we do a lot of desk research on the ecological, political, and financial risk issues. We conduct a bunch of desk research, and then we come here and meet with experts like yourself. And we conduct interviews to really try to understand what is the reality, because often what you read in desk research is at a national scale or at a regional scale, and it's not at the granular scale that one needs to really make decisions. And then we conduct surveys where we ask you, all of you and others, to fill out a survey in your area of expertise. And what we do is with these 3 buckets of information, we combine them and put them through a process that helps rate the highest risk issues. And with that, we then prioritize risks in a report. And that really, when we have limited resources, It helps us bring up the risks of greatest concern and then prioritize where actions can be taken and where funds can be raised. So, for example, I was at COP this year, the Climate Ocean Conference that was in Glasgow, and what we heard from all of your other SIDS and some of the other countries is that, you know, there's just not enough money going into adaptation and resilience. And countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, we're not responsible for the climate issue, but you're at the end of the pipe having to deal with it. And so this is exactly what CORVI is all about, is providing you all with a level of granular information that you can go forward with to, whether it's the Green Climate Fund or the UN Adaptation Fund or many of the other foundations or whatever, to get the money that is needed for, to build resilience here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and specifically in the Basseterre general area. And just to give you a couple examples, we have done CORVIs all over the world. We did Kingston, Jamaica. We've done Castries, St. Lucia. We've done Fiji, Suva, Fiji. We have several in East Africa. And with that information, it's already just starting to be used. Like, for example, in Jamaica, they created a new Ministry of Housing, Urban Renewal, and Environment and Climate Change. They used to be separate, and with our report, they kind of got this interconnected piece, you know, as an example. Or, you know, Tracy yesterday got an email from someone working with the World Bank trying to collect data that they needed for in Jamaica, and, you know, some of our CORVI information can be helpful to that. Or in St. Lucia, the World Economic Forum, you know, worked with the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, worked with the government to draft a whole new financing roadmap, and they used much of the CORVI information to really help, excuse me, prepare that. So we're just starting, as we're finishing our CORVIs and they're starting to be used, it really, that is really the goal. So I think I am going to kind of end it there, and then it would be really helpful if we could go around the room, and again, as I said, you know, when you think of climate risk in the Basseterre area, either in one word or one sentence, what is it that, what do you worry about most, or what do you just associate most? It doesn't even have to be a worry. What do you associate most with risk in Basseterre? So
maybe if we can just go around the room and folks could introduce themselves, and I'll take notes up here.
is that clear?
Yes.
Yes, morning.
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 So, I'm Warren Manners. I'm joining from the Department of Economic Affairs and TSIP in the Ministry of Sustainable Development. We are responsible for well, first of all, we do economic analysis and social analysis. We are also responsible for the monitoring of the public sector investment program, which is the slate of government's capital projects. So we monitor those projects and provide advice to the government on the budgeting for the government's capital projects. We also play a role in regard to donor coordination. We work with a number of international agencies to program projects for the country. Currently, we're the focal point for the Green Climate Fund for the country, and as part of that, we currently have a consultancy that just started about a month ago to develop an urban resilience plan for Basseterre. I'm hoping that you're aware of that consultancy, because it seems that, you know, it feeds directly into what's going on here. And so we would want our consultant to liaise closely with you in terms of the CORVI and vice versa. He'll be undertaking his work over the next 6 months or so. So just to sum up, we do economic analysis, we manage the public sector investment program, and we do donor coordination. So, thank you.
So, one more question. What do you think is the greatest risk, climate risk or ocean risk, that faces Basseterre? And that can be in the social realm, it can be in the finance realm, it can be in the political realm, it can be in the ecological realm, or it can be outside of things.
Well, I think recently we have been looking at it more from a climate standpoint, because we work so closely with the Green Climate Fund in terms of issues such as sea level rise, salt water intrusion, and the impact on the water supply. Those are what come to mind first and foremost.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Nielsa Isles. I'm from the same department as Mr. Manners, that's Ministry of Sustainable Development. And to answer the latter part of the question, one of the greatest risks I see in Basseterre, that would be the coastal erosion, especially at the area of Port Thomas. And with that happening, that affects the neighboring businesses and communities around the area. And also with climate change, it affects the fishing industry. So the self-employed fishermen, they are directly affected. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Stephen Duggins. I have an agricultural background. Within the recent past, I've done some consultancy on climate change. I'm also the chairperson for the National Steering Committee of the JEF Small Grants Program, where we review and approve projects basically of environmental nature. For me, I see the possibility and the aspects of flooding in the Basseterre as one of the major risks. I will not like to see the day when it happens, but that is something which we need to be cognizant of and keep it in our forefront. That's my 2 cents, please.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Diane Taylor Williams, and I am with the Ministry of Tourism. And like Mr. Duggins, my main concern was with the flooding, knowing that Basseterre is being sustainable.
Good morning, Misha Alford, coach facilitator on the NDC work as I'm going. As it relates to the issue or concern, nothing comes to mind right now. I'll get back to you.
Can I add something?
Absolutely.
The population, sorry. I forgot to mention the population size, because recently I was told that the population of Basseterre, not Greater Basseterre, is greater than the population of St. John's Antigua.
So like the dense population in Basseterre is what we're talking, right?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Dr. Halasayeli. I'm currently the National Project Coordinator for the IW Eco Project, which is a regional project with 10 participating countries that's being implemented by the Department of Environment. Well, one of our target areas in this project is a College Street gut. And so, of course, I kind of have to say flooding, flood risk. But I'm also, and many of you know, I'm also water engineer by training and former manager of the water utility stations. So, of course, related to sea level rise, I have to also say saltwater treatment. Because I see your defined study area encompasses the Basseterre Valley as well as the Basseterre Valley aquifer. So, of course, this would be a major risk at the forefront of my mind.
So let me ask, are we okay? I put sort of sea level rise and saltwater intrusion together. Is everybody okay with that? Got it.
Morning. Morning. Ministry of Sustainable. I see poor drainage as a problem, which leads to flooding and also storm surge.
My name is Venerise McCall, Ministry of Finance, Budget Department. And dealing with the national budget, I am responsible for monitoring and evaluating the budget on an annual basis. And I would have to say the biggest risk is financial. It is okay for us to identify all of these risks, but it takes money to fix them. And our economy is very small, and we have a challenge in producing enough to fix all this problem. We have to look at, there are agencies where we can transfer this risk, such as CRIF, it's a parametric insurance agency. We also could look at borrowing money, which puts the country at a greater financial risk. We could also look at when there is an event, a tropical event, or any sort of event, we have to divert money from our national budgets that are designated to do certain particular things to fix the issues. And so what we're doing is just patchworking here and there. The biggest risk, as I see it, is financial, because if we do not have the financial backing, all we'll be able to do is just to identify whatever risk there are.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Joyce. I'm project manager for the Western Recycling Program. And for the biggest risk, I think everyone mentioned a lot about the environmental part. I totally agree. But I think not only for environmental impact, but more like as we know in the Basseterre, the biggest economic actually is tourism. So I think that's where a big impact. After environmental pollution is where a big aspect for the Basseterre.
So, Joyce, so you said risk or environmental pollution and then risk to tourism, is that what you said?
Yeah.
Good morning. My name is Luke Hamelin. I'm Environmental Health and Safety Manager at Ross University School of Veterinary Medicine. I would say I share all the comments that were made before, but I think at the end of the day, the comment from the lady here, which is the finance aspect, is probably what comes to mind to me. Thank you.
Good morning. Hi, I'm Riching Liu from Taiwan ICDF. I'm traveling from Taipei, and it is my honor to be able to sit here and learn from all of you guys. And to me, Taiwan is also a small island, and we're also suffering from global climate change. If I have to describe one word that is the key to the climate change, I think it's partnership. Because no one can solve this problem alone, and even in St. Kitts and Nevis, all the sectors need to work together, and hopefully Taiwan has the opportunity to work with St. Kitts and Nevis and also Skinton Center to do a little contribution to climate change. Thank you.
Tracy, if we just say one more thing before we jump into it.
Hmm?
Can I say one more thing before we jump into it? Wow, thank you, everybody. That is so helpful, and we've been sort of doing this everywhere we go, and we basically are hearing a lot of the same things. And as you see, it's not one issue, and it really does lead to, as I said, the sort of interconnectedness of many of the issues. And I just wanted to point out one more time that if you look at the CORVI wheel, you will see that we are looking at ecological risk, governance, political risk, how well is the government able to address climate risk, and then the financial risks. And inside the wheel, you will see 10 categories of risk. And so we really drill into that. But underneath those 10 categories, there's close to 100 risk indicators. So that's, I forgot to mention how deep we go into the granularity of these issues. And again, I think I mentioned, data is often sparse. And so to really make meaningful decisions or contributions, you need to know that kind of information, but it's hard to find. And so with those 90-plus risk indicators that we can't get through research, that is why meeting with all of you is so very, very important, to do both the interviews and the surveys so we can really get that sense. And again, the goal for our financial folks from the Sustainable Development and the Finance Office is really to help be able to use this information to get more funding to the country to address these very, very important risks. So with that, I'm going to turn it back to Tracy? Okay, great. Thank you. What a great way to start off.
Thank you, Sally. I did just want to quickly introduce myself. I'm part of the Stimson team. I'm an economist. I'm an environmental economist. I'm the senior economist on this project and the methodological lead. And so for the next hour or so, we're going to try to have a discussion about what we just started talking about. We've got some questions that we're going to ask you all, and hopefully we can sort of get some dialogue going back and forth. So we really don't want this to be me standing up here at the front talking at you. What we really are here to do is to listen to the information that you all have, because you know more about risk in Basseterre than certainly any of us on the project team do. As Sally noted, we do have, and then after that hour goes by, we'll maybe take a brief little break, and then we're going to ask you to fill out a survey. So CORVI works by sort of three key pieces of information. We do a lot of desk research, both on risk broadly in the Caribbean region, which is what forms the basis of CORVI, as well as locally. So here we've got folks that are doing literature reviews and digging up all the information that we can find sort of out there through a literature review on the city of Basseterre. The second piece of information that we collect is survey responses. And so CORVI is really about building a body of knowledge around risk. We know that of these 96 indicators that Sally has mentioned, we have information already that we've gleaned from our research on about half of them. Now, a lot of indices will stop there. There's no information. They won't put that indicator in the list. But our theory in CORVI is that just because we can't find information on it in an internet or a literature search, doesn't mean it's not important. And so that's where we come to folks like you to help us to learn how important each of these individual risks are. And so the survey that we'll ask you to take after we've had our conversation will go through those indicators, and I will walk you through a survey, a test survey at the beginning, so it's not unfamiliar to you. But it just asks you questions about risk. It asks you questions about current risk, what the status is right now. It asks you about what happened in the past. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? It will ask you to sort of guess, and we use the word guess, don't be uncomfortable with that, what's going to happen in the future, right? Is this going to get worse, do you think, or is this going to get better? And the reason that we're okay with asking folks like you that is because you are experts in the field. And so when we talk about risk, we want to have a full picture of risks in the past, risks in the present, and what we think risks are going to look like in the future. We'll also then ask about the impact of that risk. How important is that risk to the city of Basseterre specifically? There's 96 indicators. All of them may not apply here. We started to get a sense of the things y'all are concerned about, and we're going to dive a little bit deeper into that. The third piece of information that we put into a CORVI assessment when we're writing up our city risk profile is a series of interviews. And that's really what we're going to do over the next hour, is we want to hear from people who live there, live on the ground, who work in these areas, what their concerns are, what they think the problems are, what they think the solutions are, and how well the city's doing. or the state, depending on what we're assessing. In this case, it's a city. So those three pieces are sort of all go together to make up a CORVI risk assessment. We're building this body of knowledge, and we're going to start sort of from the last one I said first, where we'll have some conversation amongst ourselves about what the biggest risks are.
Before we go into the conversation.
Yes, I inadvertently omitted the fact that we are streaming live, and there are a few of the agencies who are unable to participate with us in person, and so just want to acknowledge for those who have agreed to join online, the representative from SCELEC, also the representatives from the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank, also Mr. Satney, who was once the former executive director for the Chamber of Industry and Commerce. And the information I'm giving now is primarily for them, to let them know that we will be coming to you to either engage in either a survey and or an interview, because we've recognized that in the engagements that we had yesterday, we recognize there's lots of information we can get from an interview that the survey may not be able to pick up. And so this information is primarily for the online participants that will be reaching out to you subsequently to gather that information in your feedback as well. Tracy?
And then just to add to that, when we do the surveys, they're anonymous. When we have these discussions, they're anonymous. So your names are not associated with comments. Your organization is, but not your name. So you should feel very comfortable being able to tell it like it is, as we say. So we'd be grateful for that. And we had some great conversations with a lot of interviews yesterday. Learned a lot. Okay, Tracy, you can have this back.
Okay, so we're going to start off on the first question, which is really just building on the question we just asked you all. The question we asked you all was to sort of get your wet your whistle, if you will, get your creative juices flowing. The first question we want to talk about is questions really about local conditions, and this is where we'd like you to get as specific as possible. I forget who it was that talked about coastal erosion in Fort Thomas specifically. Right? So, for instance, for this to be a very high quality assessment, we want to be able to understand as much of the local conditions as we can. And we also want you all to feel free to not just, this shouldn't be a one-way conversation between you and me, but certainly across folks at the table. So when we're talking about local conditions, we've started a list of what areas are most important to climate, understanding climate risk in Basseterre. But I guess I'm going to ask a little further. Can you tell us about how the risks that we've talked about so far, or add other ones to the list, how they affect either your work, your business, or your family, your livelihood? We want to sort of understand as much as we can about these risks and how they are impacting either what you do or your business or your family. Folks have any thoughts on that? You want to hand around the microphone?
And while the participants are deliberated, Misha, you estimate on your response in terms of your greatest risk to the Basseterre.
Yes. Sorry, you carried live. Yes, as it relates to climate risk for Basseterre, I start more thinking along the lines of the political risk element. And there are a lot of research that are ongoing, reports and desks, plans, but it's the will of the key stakeholders and the leaders doing to really undertake it as much as it will become actionable and put in place. Also, from the human side, thinking of the risk to vulnerable populations, particularly transient populations in and around Basseterre area. We've seen some of these developments happening, especially in the most recent years as it relates to the hurricanes that occurred down south. Dominica affected St. Lucia, and you see the population like this would have moved come up north. And sometimes it's taken a long time before persons can really settle. And so any other events that would happen here could also further be traumatic to their lives again. So those two things come to mind.
Those are great. So when I say transient population, is that also sort of informal settlement?
Yes, that's informal.
I'll make sure.
And you know, there's a reason why we had to wait.
Anybody else want to react
That's a
to
good
what
one, yeah.
Hisham said? I saw a lot of
Heads nodding when he was talking.
I agree with that. I agree totally, especially. I agree with what he said, especially the political will, because that drives a lot of the action in terms of, again, my training is in the national budget. You find a lot of, when we're doing the national estimates, all of the ministries, they have to present their cases for an increase in their budgets to the National Estimates Committee, which is made up of the National Cabinet, okay? And that is where those decisions are made in terms of, are we going to be going forward on this initiative or that initiative? And so it takes, if there isn't really the political will to drive a lot of these initiatives, they go nowhere. Or we just continue spinning the wheel and then like a hamster doing nothing. And so I think the political will drives everything that we're doing here. As the gentleman says, we have a lot of reports, the work has been done, but then nothing is done after reports. And so it takes that sort of directive from the leaders to get a lot of these initiatives put in place.
Thank you, Ms. McCall. If I may, since you have a foot in that role, from somebody coming from the Ministry of Environment, what do you think is one key thing that can basically help us to get the wording right? Because sometimes the information is there, perhaps it could be how it's worded, maybe it's misunderstood, misinterpreted. So perhaps with you being close, for want of a better term, with that process, maybe you can help provide some guidance to us in terms of what is the one thing that you would say from a budget analyst do you look for in terms of to get that yay or that nay?
I can't say that. I don't make the decisions. I don't make the decisions. All I can tell you is what is presented and the decisions thereafter. Okay? I really, from my experience, and I've been doing this for a number of years, over 10 years, I cannot tell you that there is one phrase that gave them the go-ahead or something that was not said. I really do not know.
Thank you. I wouldn't mind popping in here. I've been in a position where I was presenting two budgets, and I think I'm a rather convincing kind of person. I think I make good arguments. Maybe I'm wrong, I don't know. But I think what hit home to me during that experience of having to present to the estimates is about time scale. So as a technician, I could see 10 years ago that we were going to reach this phase where, for example, water supply, the demand will outstrip supply. It was quite clear to us as technicians that this was going to happen. But, well, maybe that was 5 or 10 years down the road. At the time of making that presentation, persons were still getting 24-hour-a-day supply, 7 days a week. And so how is it that you can reconcile, especially for a person who's maybe a politician that's working on a 5-year, more or less, probably less, time scale, whereas as a technician, you're looking forward and you're working on a 10 to 15, 20-year time scale. It's very hard to reconcile that.
So can I say urgency increases over time if action is not taken?
Yeah, and then I think it's about decision making and considering the future. It's easy to be reactive. It's hard to be proactive.
Yeah. Just one quick comment on the political bit, and then I'll move on. From my experience, not presenting to cabinet, but preparing stuff for the budget, it boils down to impact, votes, some kind of guarantee shows that this will make me sustainable as a politician, and I will be there for the next term. That's my impression. Just convince them that what you do will impact the population. I will be better loved in my constituency, etc., and you're good to go. Sometimes it's not really the environment, it's not really what it is, it boils back down to that human element.
The apostles.
Okay. In terms of being specific, I am directly involved with the Urban Development Corporation. That's UDC, where we manage a bit of land, reclaimed land on the coastline. And when I talk about flooding, I meant not only on that piece of land, but with the Basse itself. Because of the fact that, as mentioned before, we're just about below sea level or on sea level about, any sudden rise or surges, we will be impacted. And for those of us who know Port Zante and how important it is to the economy, how important it is as one of our major tourism sites, you would understand the impact that can have on the entire community. And if the water comes beyond that into the Basseterre proper roadstead, further impact in terms of businesses, homes, etc. So that would be my comment in terms of being specific.
Can you shorten it to a few words for me?
Okay, someone mentioned Port Thomas area. I'm mentioning the Port Zante area as being a specific area.
Okay.
That's good enough?
Perfect, yeah.
All right, great.
That's very specific.
And we're capturing the longer too, just think of that. Just helpful to Tracy on the board.
Because we'll review all this at the end. Go ahead.
Yeah, just to follow up on what the finance person said. I'm not as much engaged as she is in terms of the final, I say, political will to approve the project, the various projects. But we tend to be involved in terms of the initial review of the various project concepts that come forward for consideration, whether from the Ministry of Public Works, etc. One project that I would highlight is currently there's a traffic light system for Basseterre, and in terms of personally being affected, I think the issue of traffic and congestion in Basseterre is affecting everyone in terms of safety. Just being able to walk through Basseterre and the increasing numbers of vehicles, the severe issues with parking as well. And the Ministry of Public Infrastructure is trying to solve that issue through that project, through the traffic signals. When the project would have already commenced, I think there were some issues related to, they had to slow the project down because there were some issues with certain stakeholders having an issue with where the lights were being placed and how it was done. So in the stage of initially developing these proposals is very critical because we have to make sure that the necessary stakeholder consultations are being undertaken with all the stakeholders, whether it be community groups, the private sector. And so as my friend has said, sometimes the projects rush to the table without benefiting from as much consultation. And they go through the process, and as Lenny said, they may end up being approved. And so I think we have to catch those issues early on in the consultation process.
So stakeholder consultation early and often. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Thanks for that.
Community and private.
Yes, and just to indicate, one of the responsibilities as the lead ministry for the implementation of this project was to create a project steering committee. And I can say that the committee has been meeting. It comprises primarily of the private and public sector. We have representation from the Ministry of Sustainable Development in Ms. Tesman Morris. We have Public Works on that. We have Climate Speak by Bryan College. We have UDC. We have Maritime Affairs and Marine Department. We also have the Urban Development Unit. Am I forgetting anyone? Of course, the Ministry of the Department of Environment. And yes, but what we're trying to do, based on the information that Sally would have presented, this is one of the first times I think I can comfortably say that when we're engaging in that risk assessment, it is no longer looking at just the environmental impacts, but incorporating the environmental, the political, social, and economic aspect of it, and
based on the information that we've received, just as yesterday, we had some 1 hour interviews yesterday, primarily with the private sector, and the information that we got was overwhelming, and it's something they're looking forward to, because if you look at just the landscape of the Basseterre area, most of the buildings and most of the operations are actually within the private sector. And we will not be able to get it done without their involvement, and they are looking actually forward to the work that we'll be doing, and we can will update them accordingly. In terms of time frame, Sally, perhaps you can give them some indication in terms of, after we would have engaged in over at least 2 months of data collecting through surveys and interviews, what is the time frame in terms of what can be expected in terms of an output? I also have a copy of the document that was created for, I think it was for
East Africa.
East Africa. I will share it with you so you can just browse it, just to give a sense of what the report would look like at the end of its completion.
And I have one from, we also have one from Kingston and St. Lucia. But I will note on the Kingston, Jamaica and the Castries St. Lucia, that was our first one, and we have learned a lot. And I have to say, honestly, being here so far has been the best CORVI process we've had as far as engagement and interest, and so thank you to that on that. With regard to timeline, we should have a report finished probably by October, November at the latest, November. And so that's when you will have the, and one of the things we didn't talk too much about is communication. The Ministry of Environment and Cooperatives have been great in communicating to the public, but what I think one of the things I'm hearing a little bit here is, there's not political will, and there's a short term because of elections, so how do we get the public to sort of enhance that political will? And I'd love to hear a little bit more about that. And I think you had a comment you wanted to make next.
Yep, and so I do want to switch to the next question.
Yeah, I don't know.
No? Oh.
Didn't I see you raise your hand a minute ago? No. Okay.
I had a health risk that we didn't talk about.
Oh, great, that's
Yeah.
One of the greatest risks is the economic risk. Basseterre is the hub of economic activities. So we have wholesale and retail, manufacturing, tourism, financial services, all within one space. Now if you have a catastrophic event, that would
Economic.
everything.
Economic.
The private sector, all the.
Oh, I thought you said health risk.
Well, that was
that's what
one, but then it was
Sorry.
businesses.
Yeah,
All the economic risk, the manufacturing, the small businesses, the
Wholesale, retail, manufacturing,
Retail.
financial services, all that.
So
financial
it's the
services.
impact and recovery after an
Yeah, I
climate
don't
event,
know how
right?
many of them actually have climate change plans, disaster risk strategies. All of this would be important. I don't know. I know a few of them are trying to get into renewable energy as a source. Other than fuel, like TDC, they're doing some solar panels. But most of them I don't think are incorporating climate change risk or even have strategies or such for that.
Lack of strategies and planning for the
Climate
business
resilience.
or resilience. Well, not just energy, but all of the businesses. Yeah.
I think Hala wanted to.
Right, yeah, there's a health risk here that I think, I'm not sure that you're understanding. I know you guys have been doing this for a few days, so I don't know if anybody brought up the issue of wastewater. Was it brought up? Okay.
Yes, please speak to that.
Tell us
I want to talk about wastewater. But there's an issue with wastewater in Basseterre. I mean, for a city that is the hub of tourism, I'm not sure exactly how we can accept that there are open channel drains still to this day. I've lived here 20 years, and it was the first thing that struck me when I entered Basseterre. I mean, it should be something that's unacceptable to us. And that being said, I mean, so there's an issue, there is a kind of twofold issue here in terms of health risk. There's and I think someone mentioned drainage, but there's the issue of gray water mixing with storm water that that can affect anybody who's walking in Basseterre, and then of course has ecological risk when you look at the nearshore environment. And then there's the risk from kind of population density and the fact that the main form of wastewater treatment in Basseterre is on site, so septic tanks. So as the population becomes more dense, we have kind of a greater density of soakaway pits that's really causing
What kind of
issue.
pits?
Sorry, a soakaway pit. So basically, in the U.S. they wouldn't call it a soakaway pit. They'd probably call it leaping tiles or.
Okay, yeah,
So
all right,
after,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
So after the septic tank where you get this primary treatment of the wastewater, then goes to an area where it's kind of infiltrated into the soil. Now this is okay in a rural area. Generally speaking, there is a kind of a form of natural treatment that's occurring. But when you reach a certain density, this no longer happens. And the fact that, like I wouldn't even want to sample the groundwater under Basseterre. There used to be wells. There was a well, for example, not far from here, just by the church, that they had to abandon. This is before 2000-ish. They had to abandon because all around it started to be a residential area where everybody puts in a septic tank, and so they start to see an increase in nitrates in that particular well, which of course is a health risk for people who are drinking that water.
Yeah.
So it's from potable water side, but also, I mean, just exposure to the gray water in the open channel drains.
So the way we frame it as leaching fields, is that what you're right?
Oh, that's what, yeah, but here it's not done so much in a lateral sense, it's done in a kind of a vertical sense, and they call it a soakaway pit. But it has the same filtration type of design. So this is no longer really an appropriate form of wastewater treatment in Basseterre, but we continue to use it. But I think our density is basically saying, hey, this is no longer appropriate. It's okay for Sandy Point and Old Road and pretty much every other area in St. Kitts and Nevis, but really no longer for Basseterre. And I think we need to address that.
Thank you. All right, I want to actually shift direction just a little bit. You guys have all led us in this perfect direction. Can I see that? Sorry.
Yep.
That's all right. I think we've talked about this explicitly, but I want to dive into it. We've talked about sort of tying the buy-in, the stakeholder engagement. We've talked about budgets. And we've talked about plans, right, and implementing them. So the next question that we want to talk about is about the efforts that are underway. What is going on that you all know about? And what are future plans? And what do you think the good things about these plans are? Because we definitely want to tell both sides of the story, but also where there are challenges. Anybody want to start off?
Well, I chose it because the issue about the undermining of the coastline, which my colleague mentioned, we did get some funding from the Caribbean Development Bank from 2018 to 2020 to assess the areas in Basseterre that are being undermined by the sea level rise, and one of the areas that were identified were up at Fort Thomas Hotel by OTI, which can be considered dangerous at this point. I think driving along there, if it's being undermined by the sea, and so we were able to get a consultancy team from Jamaica to prepare designs for a revetment for that site, as well as some other sites around the island. But if you're talking about Basseterre, that's the site that they focus on. And they also look at the Irish Town Bay Road in terms of how that needs to be protected from sea level rise. So we have the designs in place. We've turned them over to Public Works, and I think it has gone into the national budget for implementation. I already mentioned the traffic lights, which is also in the government's budget, the urban resilience plan that is underway, and I guess the project that Dr. Hill is working on in regard to the wastewater.
What was the last one? I'm sorry. The wastewater one you said?
Yeah,
I
Dr.
can give more
Hill is
details
working.
about that.
Okay, before I turn to Hannah to just give a quick overview of the IW Eco project, the question I have for you, Oren, and your team,
Now that the report and the findings have been concluded, what is the next step? Because I think most of us here could attest the fact that we do studies, we do assessments, we do studies, we do assessments, and then what? Because well, we have the Green Climate Fund now. I'm not sure if enough information is now available for us to consider the Green Climate Fund or any other donor sources. So as the Ministry for Sustainable Development, and we also have the Ministry of Finance here, it'd be good to get some sense in terms of next steps now that because the intent is to, when you've gone through the document that we circulate in terms of the report, we're actually hoping that it is not another research that is just done and put on a desk, but can actually use for action. So we're just trying to get some guidance in terms of what is the ministry's next steps now that these surveys or assessments have been done.
Well, the Green Climate Fund is, has come at a very, good time in terms of the country being able to access resources for climate change adaptation and mitigation. Those funds will take some time to program. I mean, we're just in this stage of receiving different concepts from different entities around the country in terms of what they want to see funded by the Green Climate Fund. The Green Climate Fund comes with substantial resources, but it may not necessarily be a grant, it may be a loan, because St. Kitts and Nevis is now a high-income country, and so that is something the government would have to consider whether it's willing to enter into those types of agreements. So the Green Climate Fund is there. It's still going to take some time to program those types of projects, a year or two or more. And but outside of the Green Climate Fund, that project has actually gone into the government's budget to be funded under government revenue. It went in last year. Has it been done as yet? No, because it's in public works budget, and that is where you have to look at public works capacity to actually implement their projects. You have human resource problems within some of these ministries, the ability to do things at a certain time frame, because they're stretched in terms of the number of persons and their capacity. So we hope it can be done this year in terms of Fort Thomas and so forth, but there are many constraints.
Thanks. All right. Just to quickly say before I turn to Hala, from a negotiator, from a climate change perspective, that's always been a challenge for us when we speak about the human index and not looking at our vulnerabilities. And also as it relates to accessing financing, because for us as a small and developing state, the type of resilience that we're talking about, the donor agencies may look at it as a development, but really and truly, we don't have much options in terms of what we can do. So we're hoping that based on how the GCF is constituted and the requirements in terms of having that level of collaboration across the private and public sector, we can, as a team, basically try to strategize and get the right language that is required to make them really see that we really don't want a grant alone, but we want all grant resources. But I think it's all about strategy. Each funding agency has particular language that they look for, so we just have to know what to include and what not to include to ensure that we get access to grants and loans.
Right, so for IWECO, one of our target areas I mentioned earlier was College Street Gut. So our project is a 3-year-ish project. It finishes this year. Some action is taken in a small section of College Street Gut. I'm not sure you're familiar with this term, gut. I think some people are not familiar with that.
Yeah, can you just say that? I'm having trouble
gut
hearing.
is like a type of ravine in a sense. Yeah.
Okay. The gut.
It's a term that's used in the Eastern Caribbean, kind of a natural drainage channel, generally vegetated. But in the case of the College Street Gut, this one extends quite far, well into St. Peter's, and kind of then comes into Basseterre. So we only took interventions in one small section, actually very close to here. I can take you over to look at it if you want, but basically some land degradation control measures through the installation of gabion baskets and planting of vetiver grass. This is a deep-rooted grass that helps retain soil. So those were kind of two main actions taken in a, like I said, rather small section of College Street Gut. But it was a bit of kind of proof of concept. Then you get an idea of how much that might cost and what it takes to be able to go further up where there's actually really greater risk of soil erosion in some of the upper sections, and a little bit, well, within this defined study area and beyond as well. In terms of the grey water issue, so a lot of grey water.
Can I just ask, the project you were just talking about, is it complete?
It'll be completed this year in August. So it was JEF funding, about $1 million US. But this was for activities in St. Kitts and in Nevis. Oh yeah, so related to College Street Gut, there's the issue of grey water. So of course in our assessments we realized that of course grey water is a major issue. And so we commissioned a consultant to design a kind of small pilot system for grey water collection, treatment, and reuse using a nature-based solution. So we chose constructed wetlands. And so that whole kind of small pilot project has been designed and now is going to be handed over to another JEF project, which is about to start, the Crew Plus project. And so they're going to now, hopefully, implement. And so we'll have a small pilot grey water that we can learn from and hopefully scale up into the future.
Just to add what Owen said, in terms of, and to answer Sheila's question, we have 2 readiness now with the GCF, and a part of that is the country programming. We are developing a country program for St. Kitts and Nevis. That would outline all the projects needed so we can seek funding, as well as a readiness program that would help us to build our capacity in different areas. We also have a readiness for the private sector, which would help them to be able to access funding from the GCF.
So you said you have a readiness and then a readiness for public and private readiness?
Part of the process is to develop a country program which would develop concept notes and such, all of the projects that would need to be built so we can get funding from the GCF, as well as a readiness program that would build capacity. So it's 2 different things. Your country programming is what we want funding for. So different areas, whether it be health, education, such, and the same with the readiness, would build capacity within government and outside of government to be able to access funding and such along the same areas.
Okay, not to put Daniel and Duggins on the spot, tourism, Port Sante, you are sitting next to each other literally. Is there any work that tourism, you can speak of, that tourism has been doing as it relates to climate resilience in the defined scope area? Daniel, and then we'll hand over to Duggins.
You're making a mistake. Tourism does not control the port.
I say you work together.
No, they don't control the port. SCASPA controls the port.
I stand corrected.
Yes. Although SCASPA does fall under the Ministry of Transport.
And tourism.
No, tourism.
Okay.
Yeah. So that aspect of the ministry, transport, SCASPA falls under there, as well as like Frigate Development Corporation, which is another area that will be covered. But I cannot say anything about what is being done at the port.
Okay, but tourism in general, can you speak to that?
In terms of
climate resilience, any work that has been ongoing?
Not really. I know we have been trying to get funding to do a new tourism strategy because we realized there was a gap in our last tourism strategy where we created a strategy that was intended to be pro people, pro planet, but omitted climate change. No, we did not omit pro planet. We've been doing stuff. We've done a couple of things, not necessarily at the port. For example, the project that's been undertaken in Frigate Bay and South Friars Bay, which is intended to address the situation with regard to coastal erosion in those areas. Those are 2 major projects that we've been working on. We do smaller action projects within our ministry in terms of bringing people's awareness to what is happening with regard to climate change and climate change adaptation. We actually were hoping to do a project this year. So far we have not gotten the nod for carbon footprinting project for 2022 for the tourism sector to encourage industry stakeholders to look at and start seriously considering their carbon footprint, and also to come up with a guide that would be shared with visitors. That is something we are hoping we can get the nod on to get off the ground for 2022. But we are seriously considering stuff like that. The Urban Development Corporation, and may I point out, while the Urban Development Corporation or Port Zante is at sea level, where our office is located is below sea level. If you notice, when you come to Port Zante, you have to step down, come down steps to come to the ministry. And I've been with the ministry long enough to have seen where there was flooding. We had filing cabinets, and up to the first drawer, the lowest drawer, was completely full of mud. Right, so we've been through that episode before, so we are aware of these things. We do little things to mitigate against that happening again, but we still have the same situation. But with respect to Urban Development Corporation, it would be a big challenge for us. I mean, while Mr. Duggins speaks about the fact that that is a tourist center. Greater Basseterre, the upper part of Basseterre, Old Basseterre, is where the history is, and that is what attracts most of the visitors to our destination. And when I look at this as well, Frigate Bay would also be in it, and we are responsible for the Frigate Bay Development Corporation, and as you know, it's just like an isthmus. And so the opportunities for sea level rise and all of those things to be impacted. We are dealing with a challenge, for example, right now with the pond at Frigate Bay. And that's something we are working on. We are actually working on that issue. We're trying to get some funding to address that issue, where we have the pond system going from the Atlantic to the Caribbean seaside, the 7 ponds. But the middle pond is closed off, and there is a natural flow of water between the ponds that has been stopped. And so it's creating problems with the pond, which is in Frigate Bay, which would impact the work that we've been doing in terms of upgrading the situation on Frigate Bay, on the land side, not on the seaside now. On the land side, we've been doing some works. But if we do not put in the necessary protections, we're going to have bigger issues. We're working on a sewage system as well to avoid certain implications that were taking place because such a system was not in place before, and to mitigate the results of any flooding or any climate or weather or storm surges, anything like that, the situation over there, to help to mitigate, and so that we would not be paying more at the back end when these things occur.
I don't know how much more I can add, but SCASPA is primarily responsible for the coastal areas.
No, not the coastal.
Talking about
ports.
No, only
SCASPA is only responsible for Basseterre Port.
Sorry, I'm talking about Port Zante, Basseterre Port. Sorry, Basseterre Port. It is very specific. And so UDC as a corporation, we are in contact with NEMA, and we just primarily look at mitigation measures in terms of disaster management, just in case anything spill over. But in terms of the protection, that's CASPA's responsibility. I must say that hopefully in the short future, if all goes well, we're looking at a project which would offer some protection to the Newtown area, a project which will encompass most of the area, and it would offer some tremendous protection to that front. But we are still negotiating.
Can I answer? When I hear Mr. Duggins speak about that, and I consider the situation with Port Zante, I also reflect on what was said earlier by someone about the Fort Thomas issue. The issue, I think that is something that we have to bear in mind. We sometimes do projects, they're really great, but we do not look at the results of what our project, which is great, the impact it would have somewhere else further downstream. And I think that is something we need to be mindful of, because even with the project that we've been doing at Frigate Bay and Friars, they put in the groins and all of those to to keep the sand in after we nourishing the beach, what implications would that have for the Basseterre port area or in the Burdock area where the deep water port is? And those are things that I think we need to consider, and I like the idea that we're having these kind of discussions where people do projects and everybody comes to the table so that we all know what is happening and we look to see how we will be impacted by the project.
Thanks, Diane. And just to say that we will be reaching out to SCASPA to participate not only in the survey, but I think because of the wealth of information they have, an interview that may go much longer than the survey would be required. All right?
Yeah, I have a bit of a list, so I'll just run through.
Sally?
Tracy?
Get to talk slowly for me. Or maybe we just take a picture of that.
Yeah, under I'm not sure how deep the CORVI goes, but under the CDB we also had the energy audit of public buildings to see how they can move to be more, green buildings. That the audit was done, but it's not yet funded. We have retrofitted the street lights in Basseterre. That was actually funded by CDB. Well, across both islands, so not just Basseterre, but retrofitted to LED lights. We have a project under the Global Environmental Facility that will launch on Thursday, and it will be looking at revision of the National Physical Development Plan, including the building codes, and looking to improve enforcement in terms of land use zoning, and and how persons are impacting on different parts of the environment, such as salt ponds and so forth. Under the GCF, as I said, it's a list, so just stop me.
I think I'm getting it.
Okay. Under the GCF, we're looking at a couple of proposals. A lot of them have to do with how to address water issues in the country. We have one that has proposed a solution in terms of using desalination plants for the country to generate water supply. And in terms of the projects that are funded in the government budget, the water department, they currently have a project to drill for additional water resources, which is ongoing. We had the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, which over the past years has been upgrading the Island Main Road, which includes the addition of things like sidewalks, because that's something that previously were not there, and that's an issue of safety for pedestrians.
And this one you said is ongoing,
Yeah, it's almost finished, almost completed. And we have the construction of a new Basseterre High School soon, which would, may have implications for the east part of Basseterre in terms of traffic, and there have been issues raised about sewage and so forth, but I'm not going to get into that. And finally, I know the Department of Environment, they're looking at how to develop the Vial National Park, the aquifer into a park.
that last part I missed.
The
Department of Environment.
Cheryl can explain it better than.
Thanks for putting me on the spot, right? All right. So the Basseterre Valley area, the area where usually it is protected, and there's a concept to develop it into. It will be all inclusive. There's no ministry within the government system right now that won't benefit from it. So it's basically looking at an eco-friendly type of environment, looking at health, food security, tourism, recreation, culture, but that area, and that is where we get most of our water from. So there are restrictions in terms of the type of activity
that can actually, yes,
Yep, yep.
take place in that area. Do we have any more comments, reactions from anyone?
I was curious about the boundary.
Yes, okay, so the boundary area, that was, I would have indicated that we, the committee members, we have physical planning was also a part of that committee, and in consultations with them, the definition for the Greater Basseterre, that is the area that has been defined as the study area, the Greater Basseterre. If you recognize,
It's from I wasn't sure. Is this
so it goes as far west as the Camps area, incorporating the north of St. Peter's. Okay, yes, Stone, sorry, and as far east as the Forgive area. If you recognize, yes, if you recognize, even looking at when we were doing the vulnerability assessment for the water area, you recognize that St. Peter's must be included in anything that takes place within the basin, because it's almost like a rich tree in terms of, and looking at the areas in terms of, because one of the things, if you look at the wheel, one of the questions that will come up in terms of the indicators, looking at the number of persons that are moving from the rural areas into the Basseterre area. So we decided to go just a bit outside of the Basseterre proper area to incorporate the communities just on the outskirts, just to get a sense in terms of the impact generally and inclusive, yes. But the area that has been defined there was recommended for the physical climate farming as the Greater Basseterre definition area.
That's great, so they'll share that with the...
Yes, they have it. Yes.
Oh, okay, because he was asking me what I consider, I mean, I had an interview with this gentleman doing the urban
visitors. Yes,
and we had a discussion about what is Greater Basseterre, and interestingly enough, you've included more than what I would have.
Yes, I actually have a write-up that I can share with you as well. And it just goes to show in terms of collaboration. We had, this is the third set, well, I guess you could say the first consultation since the team has been here. We had a 2-day technical workshop on Thursday and Friday, primarily with the persons who will be used as data collectors and interviewers and stuff, and Mr. Body, who was a part of that, showing in terms of the benefit of having consultations and outreach. He mentioned the urban resilience planning, and in terms of the need for us to have a conversation with them and for them to have a conversation to ensure that there's not duplication of efforts and the work can feed into the other one. So it's just to endorse the point then that there's need for greater collaboration, not just inter-ministerial, but also to include the private sector as well, because say it's, like they say, local, say this is all we have to include any and everybody in terms of the involvement. And in some instances, we may actually have to go to the private sector for money. So it is best to include them as early as possible in the consultations and involvement as well.
They're interested in working, working together, because I recently had a meeting with the executive director for the chamber, encouraging him to participate in the Sustainable Destination Council, and he's very much interested, and he was looking forward to a project because they want to revitalize the beautiful Basseterre project. So this will tie into, if you're going to be doing something, whatever they're planning, they must take these things into consideration. He also wanted them to address the waste management issue with respect to downtown, and that also creates other problems in terms of pollution, the marine pollution and all of that. So they're interested in partnering with doing projects like that. They're looking forward to putting some money within the mountain.
Yes, thanks much. We actually met Mr. Hope yesterday. It was a very interesting conversation. We had meetings yesterday with also the insurance company, Nagico, and also the bottling company. We will then reach out to the Caribbeans, but the intent is to use and integrate processes, especially to target the industries in terms of the private sector, because sometimes things are happening on the ground and they see themselves basically outside, not really recognizing that there's a need for collaboration in terms of how we can help them and how they can help us. Basically ensure that at the end of the day what is presented is something that is more holistic. So yes, Daniel, thanks for that. And Mr. Hope actually has pledged to even bring most of his members for us to actually have more detailed conversations for them to get a better understanding of the project as well. So thanks for that.
So if Frigate Bay is included, these two projects that tourism is charged with are very important ones.
Yes.
I just want to make sure.
Any other reactions, comments? Tracy?
I think we're doing
have enough paper?
Yeah, not yet. So I think we're going to have the last two questions. We've covered this. The only one is this, and I don't know if we want to do that or we want to shift over to talk it through the survey.
Maybe we can switch this over just for them to get an appreciation in terms of the
Construction.
Yeah,
what
I think
kind
that
of
makes
questions?
sense.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Great information, great conversation. We got lots of notes. We may, this will all come back and make sure that we got everything copied down right, but very good conversation.
If we want to stretch our legs for 5 minutes, because
Yeah.
the intent is to walk through at least up to 11:30, and then we can have lunch, and those who are in a position to can actually take the survey before they leave, and then we can close off. So you can stretch your legs for 5 minutes, and then we'll upload the link to just walk you through the survey.
So we're going to walk you through what the survey looks like, so that and answer any questions you have, so that when we ask you next to go ahead and take the survey, you can do that quickly and expediently. Our survey has 10 categories. Those categories are on the CORVI wheel. Apologies, I have that out. All right, so they're under those 3 types of risk. It's geology and water, climate, ecosystems, fisheries. Those are all under ecological risk. Under political risk is social and demographics, governance, stability. Under financial risk is economics, major industries, and infrastructure. So the way we've sort of designed the 3 types of risk is that experts that answer one category in, say, ecological risk often might answer 2 or 3. So for instance, if you are a fisheries expert, you might take the survey on fisheries, ecosystems, and climate. So again, I want to sort of emphasize the idea that we are building a body of knowledge here. So if you come across a question that you don't really know the answer to, we want you to make your best educated guess. So our system uses a methodology which we could talk to you for hours about, but we won't. Want to get to lunch at some point. But basically it weights your answers based on the answers you give. There's a few questions in there that we actually know the answer to. And so when we ask you the first question on an indicator, we look at how closely your response compares to the known response, and we weight your answers accordingly. So if you are completely off, those answers will get a 0 weighting. If you're close, you get weighted once, and if you really know what you're talking about, you get weighted twice. So, so I just tell you that because I want to encourage you that there'll be things that you'll be like, I don't know anything about this, and it will be part. It might be part of the survey. Each survey has a category, and then we ask the same questions, the same 5 questions about each indicator. You may be really familiar with one indicator, not so familiar with the next, but that's okay. Remember, the system basically is designed to account for that, because all of our questions are really based on risk related to these indicators. This is information that select your name, your organization, your email address, and your phone number. And I'm going to ask Natalie to fill that out while I'm talking about that. We keep that information separate and or we notice that you haven't taken the survey yet. So it's just really for use of the project team to follow up with folks. So you fill in your contact information, and then you click this drop-down box to select the Caribbean city which you'll be assessing. Now you'll see, you'll see there's a list of all of these cities here. These cities make up the region that we're looking at, right? The Caribbean region. Before we started this process, we went through an exercise where we looked at all the cities that had populations of 50,000 people or more. And so that's where that list comes from. Our regional groupings come from the United Nations Statistics Division. So we just use the regions that the UN uses. We go in, we choose all the cities that have 50,000 or more people.
So is Basseterre there?
Yeah. Right at the very top.
50,000 or more Basseterre?
No, the population of the country.
The country or the city?
It's the city.
Oh.
So then Basseterre won't get listed?
No, we're
Yeah. What is the population?
I can't see, so
30,000?
it's listed.
What is the population of Basseterre?
It's less than 30,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But right, so the study area too, though, right? So it's beyond Basseterre,
Oh,
right?
yes,
So it's that
yes,
entire
yes.
study area,
Yeah.
right?
It's about 20.
Yeah. So we look at sort of metropolitan areas. We look at the little broad.
Yeah, so the whole country is about 50. So
But as long as Basseterre is listed, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's right there at the top, Basseterre. Go ahead and click next. Okay, and so then we want you to go ahead and select a category. Hold on. Can you scroll back down? So we're in the selected category. And so we give a little bit of explanation about how we're structured around these 10 risk categories, which are made up of 100 indicators. You've all heard that today. Please choose which category you would like to answer. If you have relevant expertise, please consider completing more than one category. Right, this is what we just talked about. Most experts answer 2 to 3. Each category takes about 15 minutes to complete. And then scroll up, and then we have a map of the study area, which outlines the area that you should consider in your response. And you click this drop-down box, and you select a category. Does anybody want to pick a category for us to walk through? I can pick one.
Major industry.
Major industry, great choice. So we go to the major industries category. There's a brief description of what we mean by major industries at the very top. And then we list out the indicators that we're going to ask about in the survey. In this case, there's 6 of them. Percent of the national economy based in agriculture. Percent of the national economy based in the nearshore fishing industry. Percent of the national economy based in offshore fisheries. Percent of the national economy based in tourism. A percent of the national economy based in ports and shipping. And then diversity of lodging types. So I will say, we're not going to ask you to tell us these percentages. So you don't need to know that. What we're going to ask you to do is think about the sort of relative weight of each of these industries compared to Basseterre, as well as compared to other cities in the region. We again talk about what the region includes, and we give you some information on what we're going to ask you. I think I talked about this a little bit earlier. We want to ask about the baseline, the current status right now. We ask about the past. We ask about the future. We ask about the magnitude of the future trends. So if it's getting worse, is it getting really worse? Is it getting worse fast? Is it getting worse slow? Is it getting better? Is it getting better fast or slow, right? And the last one is the impact of increased risk to the coastal city. Go ahead and hit next. So here's the first indicator, the percent of the national economy based in agriculture. So we define the indicator. This indicator measures the percent contribution of agriculture to national GDP for the country in which the coastal city is located. So this is the last thing I'll sort of tell you before we kind of move through. Some of our indicators are nationally based. Some of them are city-based. We recognize that sort of when we're looking at different types of economies, that information is rarely available at the city level, more often available at the national level. So question 1, how would you rate the percent of the national economy based in agriculture in your country compared to other countries in the Caribbean? So how dependent is St. Kitts and Nevis on agriculture compared to other countries in the Caribbean? Anybody want to give me a guess?
Oh, it's low. What's the options? Low, high?
So lowest is 1, highest is 10. Want to give it a 2 or a 3?
Compared to other countries.
Yeah, compared to other countries.
2 or 3.
Okay, we'll give it a 2.
It's
Based on contribution to GDP or social construct?
So this one is based on the percent of contribution of agriculture to national GDP.
Okay, it's 2. It's only 1%.
Ours is 1%. So compared to other countries, it's quite low.
So how do you think the percent of the national economy has changed over the past 10 years? And can we show the options? So has that increased, has it decreased, or has it stayed the same? So 10 years ago, did you have more ag or less ag?
More
Agriculture.
Yeah,
Yeah, there was sugar, yeah.
So it's decreased in the past 10 years, right?
20.
Sugar was 2005, so that wouldn't be applicable. Because it's in the past 10 years.
So 10 years, so then what I'm hearing is that maybe it stayed the same.
Well, it used to be stronger on the crops and crops and livestock, when they have a lot of impact where it is not so much.
It's less. After the drought, it's the drought.
It's less.
About the same.
2016.
Stay the same.
2016, it's less.
What you can let them know, everybody have their own different.
Mostly it's decreased.
Okay, whatever, it doesn't matter.
Just to say that everyone will be doing an individual survey and it will be based on your information.
Your opinion.
And if, like Tracy said, the information also will be matched with what empirical data that we also have. And then if you're way off, it will just put it aside. And if it is on stat or close to, or if everybody, all the information seems to be aggregating towards one area, then they will look at that. So there's no right answer, no wrong answer, because everything will then be merged and be looked in a more holistic manner. So we can debate now, but just to walk through the, just for the spirit of getting a sense of the type of questions, we're just going to watch it. So the information I give now may not necessarily be correct, because this will just be deleted when you're doing your individual surveys.
But this is the kind of information that is the beauty of the system, is to find out what those answers are. So what are we choosing? Stay the same?
Decline.
Go ahead. Oh, decline, fine, decline. Okay, and keep in mind, this is 10 years we're looking at. So 20, there is one distinction to where we look at 10 years, and that's in climate questions.
No, 15.
So all of them we look at 10 years, except in climate questions, where we look back 15 years and look forward 15 years. And the reason is because when we met with our climate advisor down here in the Caribbean, they talked about the idea that climate, as we know, sort of the changes in climate are measured on longer scales.
Yeah.
So every indicator will be measured on a 10-year looking back, on a 10-year looking forward, except the climate ones. Okay, the next question, actually, we don't have an answer for that one yet. So the next question is, how do you think, this is the one we're going to look forward, question 3, how do you think that the percent of the national economy based in agriculture will change over the next 10 years? So since we have decreased, we want to say stay the same for now. Again, this is just a hypothetical.
Increase, let's be positive.
Increase, okay, we want more agriculture. Excellent, okay, great, I think that's wonderful. Okay, over the next 10 years, do you think, or how do you think the change in the percentage of the national economy based in agriculture in your country would compare to other countries in the Caribbean? So is your agriculture going to grow faster than other countries, about the same, or potentially slower? And that's going to be on a scale of 1 to 10. So the slowest change is here at 1. The quickest change is going to be here at 2. So do we want to put a 5 in there to be optimistic?
Quickest change is 10.
I'm sorry, did I say 2?
Yeah.
Sorry, 10. So 1 to 10. Let's put a 5 in there just to
Move the process.
move the process along, because we have 4 more indicators to go through. And then this last one is, this is the sort of, one of the most important questions is, how much do you think the change in the percent of the national economy based in agriculture contributes to increased risk for your coastal city? So how important is this building agriculture in terms of climate risk? How important is that on a scale of 1 to 10? Least important, most important. Anybody want to hazard a guess?
Everyone understands the question?
So when we're thinking about the percentage of GDP that agriculture contributes to, how important is that when we're thinking about climate risk? So right, this whole exercise is about understanding what factors contribute the most to climate risk here in Basseterre. How important is the agricultural contributions to GDP?
I think you could flip it a little. How important is the effect of climate change on agriculture to leading to risk to the agriculture? Isn't that what you're trying to get to?
No.
Okay, I'll go back to work.
Yeah, so it's understanding what factors, again, we're trying to look at what factors increase risk, climate risk, right? And so the end result is that we want to say, here's the factors we need to address. Right? So if we think agriculture is one of the ones, the contributions, and we think that building a stronger agricultural foundation here in St. Kitts and Basseterre is important, then we want to say that that's most impactful. If we think there's other things that are more important, we want to go into
I
that.
think it's an interesting question for a number of reasons, but primarily because the agriculture sector, which is more predominantly in the rural side, feeds into an informal sector in the outside, Basseterre side, and so there are direct
and indirect
relations that we might want to really consider. But for that grouping of persons, if anybody have done any studies of the vendors in Basseterre, up until about 2014, recognized this big base of the income is really there, and these people are building homes from these things. They're making a real good killing there, so it's a real serious impact. But knowing that on the surface, I don't know that average person could glance and say that we would have a big impact, but it is a significant impact.
So, and that's the thought process, that's exactly the thought process we're
That's why we got a definition, because on the social aspect, it is significant.
And so to your point, when we're talking about climate risk, absolutely think about that social impact, and it's how this indicator affects all of those things. When we're talking about climate risk as a whole, we're talking about social, we're talking about financial, we're talking about businesses, we're talking about the environment.
Basseterre is massive.
So 7 or 8 is what I'm maybe hearing?
Yes. I mean, that's part of it.
Go ahead, yes,
Farmers depend on them.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and hit next. That's exactly the kind of conversation that we want to have and the thought process. So that's it. So that's the first indicator done. Now we are in the second indicator, and we're going to go through the same exact process. Right? So the second indicator is the percent of the national economy based in the nearshore fishing industry. Local fishermen, right? Not offshore, local. This indicator measures the percent contribution of nearshore fishing to national GDP for the country in which the coastal city is located. So, the question 1, again, how would you rate the percent of the national economy based in nearshore fisheries in your country compared to other countries in the Caribbean? Is it, this is that today, that's setting that baseline. Is it the lowest compared to other countries? Or is it the highest compared to other countries?
Low.
It's not the lowest, but it's low.
It's low.
Okay.
Comparing it to other countries, I think, is the tough part. Right? I mean, in answering some of these questions right now, I mean, I find in thinking about the other countries, I may feel that I don't know enough of how the status is.
Absolutely. And that's okay. And you know, what you can do is compare it just to the neighboring countries, the ones you know about.
Yeah.
And if not, you can put it in its own risk framework. But generally, you want to have some sort of comparativeness, because if we didn't say compared to what, that's what everybody would ask us, right? Compared to what? So we're going to get a 4. Okay, I think I know the answer to this one. How do you think that the percent of the national economy based in nearshore fisheries has changed over the past 10 years? Increased. Okay, good. How do you think it will change over the next 10 years? Will it continue to increase? Okay.
Decrease.
Really?
Decrease.
What are they going to be fishing for?
They won't find any fish.
I'm surprised, but yeah. Okay. We have some optimistic people here in the room. That's okay. Again, this is just a test here. This is not going to actually be data.
But if we have MMA, so once we have that management, it should be, the resource should be kept intact.
There you go.
Okay, sold.
Yeah.
I like your optimism.
Yeah.
So here's our next question on that. Over the next 10 years, how do you think the change in the percent of the national economy based in nearshore fisheries would compare to other countries? So what I'm hearing is you all here have done something that we think is going to have good results.
If implemented.
I know, exactly.
If implemented, maybe that should just be the title of the report. But we're maybe a little bit positive, so maybe a 6. That sound good? And then here's the question that's the guts of it really. How much do you think that the change in the percent of the national economy based in nearshore fisheries contributes to increased climate risk for your coastal city? How important are having healthy fish stocks, local nearshore healthy fish stocks,
Critically important.
when we're thinking about climate risk to the city of Basseterre?
Like 2 out of 10.
I mean, I'll tell you what I'd be pointing at. I'd be right here. So
Yeah, 2 out of 10.
Yeah. Go ahead, put 10. So there's number 2. So we are just going to go through the last couple quickly because there's 2 questions at the end that we need to talk through. So now we're at offshore fisheries. So how would you rate the percent of the national economy based in offshore fisheries compared to other countries in the Caribbean?
Low.
Low. Okay, 3. How do you think the percent of the national economy based in offshore fishing has changed over the last 10 years?
It's gone up.
Gone down?
Up.
Up. Okay, increased.
Yeah.
So your offshore fisheries are getting stronger is what that means, right? Your offshore fisheries are getting stronger? Pulling in more fish? Okay. All right, again, while we have more
Yes.
and how will it change over the next 10 years?
Up.
Okay. Over the next 10 years, how do you think the change in the percent of the national economy would compare to other countries in the Caribbean?
Increase.
What do you say?
5.
5.
What was the first one? Was it two? Yeah.
And how do you think the change in the percent of the national economy based on offshore fisheries contributes to increased risk?
Yeah.
How important is offshore fisheries to when we're thinking about climate risk? Want to go middle of the road there for now?
Yeah.
Go ahead, do 5 or 6. Okay, next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Tourism. How would you rate the percent of the national economy based in recreation and tourism compared to other countries in the Caribbean? So how much of a contributor is tourism compared to other Caribbean countries?
No, it's not. No, mostly others are more dependent, like Antigua and Barbuda and St. Lucia and them.
And you're not?
We're not as dependent as them. Ours is 24.
Okay, so 3 or 4?
Tourism?
No.
When you consider beyond just hotel and restaurant. Hotel and restaurants only is about 14%.
Yeah, but the spin off of the economy is like 66%.
No, they said 24.
It's all
But
right.
the fact is we haven't done satellite accounting to actually
Yeah, that's what our challenge has
accumulate
been.
how much it has contributed to the economy. We can only guess, but it's a significant.
Okay, so we'll go with a 4 here because I'm hearing that it's important and then I'm hearing less than other countries.
Yes.
So we'll hit it in the middle. Do we think it's going to increase in the next 10 years or decrease relative to other countries?
Last 10 years.
Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. How has it changed in the last 10 years? I apologize. So has tourism grown
Outside the last 2 years increase.
in the last 10 years?
You skip out before COVID.
Okay.
Yeah, without.
Yes, yeah. So and so we know COVID has made an impact that really is not measured by this. So recognize that we understand that and sort of try to think, outside of COVID. Because it really changed everything. And then over the next 10 years, another increase here?
Yeah.
Go ahead. And then, how do you think the change in the percent of the national economy based in recreation and tourism would compare to other countries? Lowest change compared to other countries over the next 10 years, looking to the future? Lowest or highest? So are you guys going to pull in all the tourists? Is that the plan?
7.
Okay, 7. Okay, good.
We're going on a sustainable tourism economy.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm hearing. And how much do you think that the percent of the national economy based in recreation and tourism contributes to increased risk for your coastal city? Keep in mind that we do our magic because this is really a reversal, right? It's important, right? Most impactful. Yeah, okay. Next.
More spend, not more visitors.
All right, ports and shipping.
That's the last one.
There's 2.
Okay.
So ports and shipping, percent of the national economy based in ports and shipping, probably pretty high, right? Low, medium?
That includes to pools.
I'm sorry?
That's interesting.
Includes everything coming in?
Ports and shipping, yes. So your ports and your shipping industry.
Including the cruise industry.
Cruise industry is tourism. The cruise industry is tourism.
Okay, so not the okay.
But the port that supports the cruise industry is ports,
Okay.
right? We'll give it a 5 for now. That way we can get through these last couple.
Yeah.
Let's go with increase. Go ahead, increase. Over the next 10 years, how do you think the change in the percent of the national economy based in ports and shipping in your country would compare to other countries in the Caribbean? This is thinking port infrastructure.
And the infrastructure does include where the cruise ships go. It's just not the cruise ship economy.
Exactly, that's exactly right, and that is the distinction. So let's give it a 5. Again, you'll all have the chance to pick the numbers that you think are appropriate. Go ahead, hit 5. We'll go on to the next one. One more indicator. Diversity of lodging types. So this one I did want to talk through just briefly. We had heard from other partners in the Caribbean that we've worked with that there was sort of the rise of Airbnbs. Yeah, exactly. Also that a lot of the sort of big resorts that some folks have in Sandals and those kind of things, the money all goes offshore. So they really wanted to talk about this diversity of lodging types. Is diversity of lodging types an issue here in St. Kitts and Nevis? or not so much?
We don't have a lot of stock.
Okay.
All right, so we'll give it maybe a 3?
Not including Airbnb because we don't capture Airbnb.
And do we think that this is, the diversity in lodging types has increased?
No, it has decreased. It might be balanced out because we've lost some and we've gained some. For example, you look at OTI, you've lost OTI, but you would have gained the call.
Okay. So let's go with stay the same?
No, but that's not, marriage is more than 10 years.
Yeah. Stay the same? Again, this is just, the objective here is not to answer the questions, but just to let you all understand how to take the survey.
In 10 years, it's going to increase.
In 10 years, it's going to increase. All right, let's go 8 on number 4. And then how important is this? How important do you think the change in the diversity of lodging types contributes to increased climate risk?
Very important.
Very important. So give that a 10. Next. Okay, so we've now made it through all the indicators. I'm going to ask for your attention this last 2 questions, and then I'll let you all go. The next thing we want to do is we want you to look at the indicators and tell us which ones you think are the most important. So you look at this list of 6 indicators that we've just talked through and choose the 2 indicators from this category that you think are the most important for understanding the overall level of risk. Right, so this is your chance to say, this is the most important and that's the most important. So we're just going to click, let's go nearshore fishing and tourism. You all will have different answers than what we just put up. And then we have the next and final question for the category, takes the 2 indicators that we chose off that list and leaves you with the last 4 and says which ones are the least important, which ones matter the least. And so let's just click the first 2 so that we don't upset, make anybody unhappy. And then the very last question is, are there any additional indicators that we missed? Right, so we're always sort of seeking to improve this. We've heard some feedback from folks that there are things that we did not consider. This is your chance to tell us about that. Go ahead and hit next. Now you're at the very end of this category. Now remember, most experts answer 2 to 3 categories. If you were answering about major industries, you might choose the drop down and select another category. And then you can pick, let's say you want to talk about infrastructure, for instance. And then that would bring you to the infrastructure survey, and you go through that same process. That's the survey. Do folks have questions?
So we just go on the website and
yes, I've actually, for those persons who have what email addresses they have, I've already sent it. I've sent some via WhatsApp. Trying to get some consensus here. Lunch is here, so timing is perfect. I promise to get you out of here very fast. But just before we move though, if you look at the information presented in terms of the categories, most of us in here, and we recognize those who are actually going to be providing support through the surveys, more likely than not, will be in a position to answer more than one category. You may be able to answer, for instance, on the climate and also geology and water, also look at ecosystems. Somebody who's speaking about the ecosystems may speak about the infrastructure and that kind of thing. Mr. Dove is not to put you on the spot, but you're representing UDC, so you may be looking at infrastructure, but your background in agriculture, you may be able to look at ecosystems as well, just as an example. So what we're trying to do is the more surveys that we get completed, the more Saladin would be quite happy in terms of the analysis. And that will help also to kind of, those that needs to be pushed to the side because the answers were far off. So we're hoping that with your support, one of the things I also need to mention is that initially when we started doing the collection in terms of the potential stakeholder list, we did not know at that time that there is an opportunity for more than one person within a particular sector to answer the question. So it may be
within sustainable development, it may be maybe your senior officers. It may not just be you or it, but all the senior persons who you think can give, good expert response within the information as well. Same thing to you, Diane, in terms of tourism. You may be able to identify a few persons who you think within your industry, who you think would be more supportive.
Industry or in the office?
In the office and industry, because that's one of the last questions that we also want you to provide some support to us in terms of persons and or agencies or organizations whom you think would be ideal or appropriate to participate in either the survey or the interview as well. So I seek your guidance in terms of your approach. Do you want to take a stab at the survey while you eat, or do you want to eat and then survey, or I'm guided by you? Ala's nodding her head for...
I did one, so I'm doing it.
Oh,
Excellent.
okay.
Yeah.
And so I do want to just sort of emphasize that survey should not be a groupthink exercise. Do not, this is your opinion. We want to get everyone's opinion. Groupthink, will give us a completely different result than getting everyone's opinion separate.
So you were saying
Yes.
Okay, for those who may not be in a position to complete the survey, the process is that, because the survey goes directly to the Simpson Center. And so when you looked at the first page, you would have indicated your name and email address. That is just for information, so if it's incomplete, Sally will get a nudge and then she will come to me and I will come back to you to complete the survey. If you have any questions, clarifications. I know when we did the technical workshop last Thursday and Friday, one of the questions that was asked, what if you click sent by accident, oops, what happens? You just communicate to whomever is guiding you through that process in terms of completing the survey. We reach back out to the Simpson Center and they can just basically retract it or ask you to just do a new survey, and they will just basically delete the first one that was submitted. So there's scope to make the necessary adjustments accordingly, so don't be scared.
Can you pause? Can you do a piece and go back later? Or once you finish, you have to finish?
So it's best if when you sit down to do one, you finish the whole thing, because what will happen is we'll just get a note that says it's incomplete, and then we'll go back and say this is incomplete. However, if you do one, they usually take about 15 minutes, to be honest. If you do one, and then the next day you're like, I want to do another, then just start from the beginning and put your name and all that in again. Since, because you can either do as many as you want in a row once, or you can do a different one every day or whatever that you want to do. And also, we brought some laptops with us. If people didn't bring a laptop and want to do any today, they're welcome to.
So for those who don't have a laptop, I can loan you mine so we can get it done as fast as possible.
Yeah, I have mine.
I'm not sure if I'm going to see you tomorrow, so I'm taking advantage of the opportunity now.
Does anyone want a laptop?
For the benefit of those persons who are also streaming, we can probably just do an official wrap-up just to say thanks for those who are streaming online, and we will definitely be coming to you. We know who you are. And on behalf of the Minister of Environment, I just want to say thanks for the contribution this morning. I think was quite engaging, and I'm hoping that you are just as excited as I am to participate in the survey and also looking for the end result. Sally, any final words? Because we just want to just cut the stream so we can get the persons to engage and also eat as well.
Just a huge thank you, really, to all of you. I know everyone is so busy, and to take time out of your incredibly busy schedules to join us, to learn about the project, as well as take the surveys. We're just really grateful, because the end result is only as good as the local input from all of you. And then, again, the goal is, let's get it all right, and let's go after the big funds internationally to make a real big difference. So thank you, everyone. And all questions, Cheryl's here, she's not going anywhere. Thank you.
All right, thanks.